Hello and welcome to the Twins Mummy NI podcast. I am mummy to 2-year-old twins Ayla and Aria. Join us in our twin adventure as I explore a range of topics on parenthood. Hello everybody and welcome to the 36th episode of the Twins Mummy NI podcast. If you've just stumbled upon this podcast, my name is Carla and I work as a TV journalist, but now I am a stay-at-home mum to twin toddlers. If you're interested in topics such as maternal mental health, parental well-being, and what life is really like for a first-time twin mum, then this is the place for you. You are very welcome. You can also check out our twin adventure on Instagram at twinsmummyni. Now, in this week's podcast episode, I am joined by twin dad Joe Rawlinson. Joe is the creator of Dad's Guide to Twins book and popular podcast. He dedicates a lot of his time to opening up the narrative about the realities of twin parenting. And Joe offers many insights and tips from a twin dad's perspective. So why not join Joe and I as we discuss our experience of being twin parents from across the Atlantic Ocean.
I live in Austin, Texas with my wife and 4 children. My kids are all now older teenagers. My oldest is 20. I have an 18-year-old and my twins are almost 17 years old right now. And as you can tell, they're all really close in age. So when our twins were born, we had 4 kids ages 3 and younger. So it was kind of a crazy time in those early years, but I wouldn't trade it for anything else. When we found out that we were having twins, I went looking for stuff online to help me as a dad get ready. And I found that there really wasn't a lot of information for dads. There was a lot of things for moms, by moms. And so what I started to do was just started a blog, Dad's Guide to Twins, and I just started recording the stuff that I was experiencing, the things I was learning along the way. And that started to resonate with dads all over the world, and started a podcast with the same name, Dad's Guide to Twins podcast, and ended up writing a couple books for dads. And it's been a fun adventure these last 16 years, been helping dads all over the world with their twin adventures.
That is incredible, Joe. Like, what wonderful work that you have done. Give us a flavour about, say, for example, your podcast and your book, you know, some of the topics that you might discuss in it.
Well, when dads find out that they're having twins, I mean, parents in general, they kind of freak out. They're worried about all the possible things that could go wrong. And so I try to help dads understand that, first of all, those concerns are very common amongst us as parents of twins. So they're not alone in those concerns. And that a lot of things that we worry about can actually be managed and overcome because other parents have done it too. You know, other parents of twins have done that before. And so a lot of my podcasts are interviews with other dads, sharing their stories, you know, maybe some of the complications that they had or troubles that they had and how they overcame those, but also interviews with dads who had, you know, totally normal pregnancies with their wives or their partners. The twins were born healthy. There was no problems at all. I mean, that's totally a normal situation too. And so sharing some of the good and the bad of what could happen to help dads know what's possible, and that, you know, no matter what life throws at them, they can overcome those challenges, to kind of focus on the things that they can control, things that they can prepare and work together with their partner on, instead of worrying a lot about all of the possible crazy scenarios that could happen to them.
Let's start, I suppose, at the very beginning. Can you remember whenever you found out that you were expecting twins? What was that like?
So it was actually Christmas Eve, and we had, like I mentioned earlier, we had 2 very young boys. They were both toddlers under the age of 2. We found out that my wife was pregnant. And so the first step was to go to the doctor to confirm the pregnancy. And I had gone with my wife before for each of our previous pregnancies for that first checkup. But as we had 2 very active young boys, I told my wife, why don't you just go to the doctor by yourself? I'll take care of the boys and just let me know how it goes. And so I dropped my wife up at the doctor. I had my boys in the back seat of the car, and we were just driving around waiting for mom to be done. And then she calls me on the phone and says she's ready for a pickup. And she said it was a slow day at the doctor's office. The checkup went fine, but they were also able to do an ultrasound and everything looked great. And they saw healthy heartbeats. And I thought, well, that's great. I'm glad you had a good checkup. And I paused for a minute. I said, wait a minute, did you say heartbeats as in more than one? And she said, yes, we're having twins. So I found out over the phone while I was sitting in the car listening to my boys in the back seat. And I was just like, oh my, how are we going to do this? Because I already knew we had our hands full with our very active boys. And I could only imagine what doubling the size of our kids would be. So I drove, I got her picked up at the doctor. We got home and we were trying to process what it meant. We didn't have a lot of time because the very next day we were flying across the country to go visit family for Christmas. And so we kind of had to put all of our emotions and stuff on the shelf and just, it was like several days later when we actually got time to sit down together and talk about what was going to happen. And so it was a crazy discovery.
It's amazing how you can recall all of that as if it was just yesterday. It's a moment that you suppose you never forget. And then, from that moment onwards, how did things go throughout the pregnancy? And
we had a lot more visits to the doctor than we had with our singleton babies. That was something that was new to me, because I was used to trying to go to the doctor with my wife during the pregnancies just to see how progress was being made. And we had a lot more visits, a lot more scans, a lot more ultrasounds. And so every visit was good in that you would get information more frequently. But it was also kind of nervous because every time you go, you're like, well, are they going to share some kind of news that may be bad? We found out that our girls were Modi twins. So there was some slight risk with Modi twins where they could have twin-to-twin transfusion syndrome or something like that. So the doctor starts mentioning some of these things, and we're like, oh no, what could be the possibility? Turns out that ended up not being a problem. My wife did get put on kind of modified bed rest in the last trimester, which she wasn't in bed all the time, but she was supposed to keep her feet up and not do a lot of physical stuff at the end, which presented a challenge for us because, like I said, we already had these two little boys that would just, run circles around her at the house while I was at work. And so we had to be creative in how we came up with how we take care of the boys, how do we take care of my wife. And we ended up kind of a combination of me adjusting my work schedule so I could be home more. There was a teenage girl across the street that we hired as a babysitter to come play with our boys so my wife could get some rest. So the pregnancy itself went, aside from the bed rest and a few potential surprises that didn't actually turn out to be anything, it was pretty smooth. Of course, my wife was a lot more uncomfortable than she was with each of our singleton babies. And by 36 weeks, we went to the doctor for just like a weekly checkup. And at that point, my wife was emotionally, mentally ready to have these babies. Even though the babies were not ready to be born yet, she was complaining to the doctor about that. And the doctor did on the test that detected that my wife was already having contractions. And so the doctor's like, well, do you want to have these babies today? And we're like, wait, today? Okay, we're having babies today. So ended up we had already planned for a cesarean section. And we went in, that was the morning. We had a doctor's appointment, maybe 10 in the morning. By that evening, the girls were born. And I had gone to work that day. I was going to take off, like early lunch break to go to the doctor with my wife, and then expecting to go back to work. Never went back to work. Stayed at the hospital with my wife all day. We had the babies. To that point, everything went pretty smoothly. A lot of our concerns, health-wise, during the pregnancy never really materialized. It turned out to be a pretty good pregnancy, aside from some of the bed rest issues. So it's just about managing our crazy household with our young boys and the twins coming.
Can't imagine your wife going in and finding out, okay, the babies will be born today. Such a shock. One thing I was thinking, I know with my own husband, he was with me with all of the extra scans that we had with our twin girls, and we had a planned cesarean section as well. And whenever I was pregnant at the time and during the birth experience, I always kind of felt that he was very much on the sidelines. There's only so much, he could do there. He was always there holding my hand and supporting me every step of the way. What was it like, sitting beside your wife during that birth experience, or sitting beside her at each of the scans? What was that experience like? I'm just thinking if there are any multiple dads to be who are maybe listening and maybe think they'd like to be able to help out more, to do more, what would you say to them?
I realized that she was doing all the work, taking care of these babies in the womb. And my role during the pregnancy was to try to make her life as easy as possible, if that was within my control, right? So I was trying to think, well, what was my wife doing before the pregnancy or trying to do during the pregnancy that I could help with, that I could do instead of her, so she can have the rest, so she can have her focus her energy on nurturing the babies inside her. So a lot of that was taking care of our two boys. A lot of it was taking care of stuff, logistics and stuff around the house that I didn't want her to have to worry about that stuff, because she was on the most important task, which was growing these babies. I wanted to support her going to the doctor visits, just so that I knew the information the doctor was sharing. She and I have a good partnership in that maybe I'll think of something that she wasn't thinking of, like question wise, or so that she would ask a question to the doctor that I hadn't thought of, or I would ask a question to the doctor that she hadn't thought of. So it helped us get a better picture of what was happening with the pregnancy when we were together. When I felt a lot of it was a lot of things I tried to focus on were the physical preparations we can make for the twins and for preparing our family for them. So things about preparing our home, preparing the nursery, making sure we had all the gear we needed, trying to think through our financial preparations of how we can adjust our budget to accommodate the added expenses of 2 more children. So a lot of those things that were easier for me to focus on and can control, because I could not control how the babies were growing. I could not control any health issues. And so I try to put my energy on other things that I can do. When it came time for closer to the birth, and like I mentioned that day where we went to the doctor expecting a regular visit, and all of a sudden it's time for the babies to be born. Like you described it, like your husband, I was there, I was holding her hand, I was talking through it. We were in kind of a waiting area in the maternity ward where, in retrospect, I realized we were just waiting for an open operating room for the cesarean section. But we had all these other moms that would come in. We'd hear them going through labor, and then they would leave to go have their babies. And that happened like all day long, over and over and over again. And so we're like, when is it our turn to have these babies? So we made it to the end of that day. And then I watched as they took my wife away to get her ready for the operation. And both of our boys had been born via C-section. So I had seen that experience before. However, there's this moment where they take your partner away, and you're supposed to dress up in the medical gown and scrubs and stuff. And then you just wait as the dad, you're just waiting. And you're all alone in the hallway, and it seems like the lights are dim and there's nobody around. And you're like, did they totally forget me? I'm still out here waiting. Do they even know they're supposed to come get me to have these babies? And so I'm walking back and forth, and time's ticking by. I'm thinking maybe I should just go start opening doors to see maybe this is where I'm supposed to have my babies. So it seems like forever you're waiting, and I'm feeling all the emotions of, what's it going to be like, hoping everything's going to be okay with the procedure. Babies are going to be healthy. And then finally a nurse comes out and grabs me and rushes me in. And once dad's in the room, it's like, away we go. There's no more delay. They've already got mom set up on the table. She's already got the anesthesiologist. I sat up by her head. They had like a kind of a curtain between her upper body and her lower body. So I could talk to her sitting next to her on the table. I could like touch her shoulder and stuff. But the only doctor that was right there with us was the anesthesiologist who was controlling her medication to make sure she wasn't feeling the C-section. And he wasn't able to tell us like what's happening with the babies. So I see a bunch of movement across the curtain, but the doctor who was delivering the babies did not want me to stand up and see that. I guess they have a problem with sometimes dads fainting or not being able to control that. Yeah. So I see a lot of motion, my wife they're physically moving my wife around to, pull the babies out. So I can see her upper body moving about. It was just kind of a surreal experience. And then, one of the babies is out, and I like rush over because they clean up the girl and they check her out and make sure she's healthy. So I rush over there to see that experience. I'm counting all the fingers and toes to make sure everything is normal. And I'm like, this is amazing. And I look back at my wife, but you have a mask on. You can't really, smile at each other or anything. And then I'm like, there's another one coming. So I'm like running back and forth between my girl who was just born and to be there with my wife for the birth of the second. It was just an amazing experience. I tried my best to communicate to my wife because I could see better than she could on the table what was happening, how our daughters are doing, what's happening with the procedure. So that was kind of my role, was to just soak it all in, to communicate, to support my wife in that very moment.
Whenever you met your twin girls for the first time, what was that experience like?
I was amazed. First of all, they were so small. They were smaller than our boys when they were born, because as you know, twins are born earlier, and our girls were like a month earlier than our boys had been. So I was so surprised how little they were compared to our 2 boys previously. And so I see these little, amazing, beautiful, fragile little babies, and I immediately, want to do everything I can to take care of them and to love them and to make sure that they're safe and healthy. And I was in love. We had already picked some names before they were born, so we knew what their names were going to be, and so I started to associate the name with the individual characteristics of each girl, and it was overwhelming. I was in love with them, and I wanted my wife to see them and to experience that, but she was also going through this major surgery and having to get put back together, and so I was trying to figure out how I could see and share what I was seeing with her when she was across the room on the table, not being able to experience that.
Beautiful to hear what it really is like from a twin father's perspective, by your wife's side. So you then come home from the hospital and you then became a family. You grew from a family of 4 to a family of 6. What was life like in those early days of twin fatherhood? You just come home from the hospital, trying to, I suppose, establish routines, your new family life now. What was that time like?
It was It was crazy. But I mean, there's no way to talk around that. Uh, the first 9 months to a year was very blurry because you're so sleep deprived trying to take care of these babies. We knew because we were already parents. We knew that we were going to have to be on a schedule. We knew we were going to have to be changing their diapers, their nappies every several hours. We're going to have to feed them every several hours, and we knew that that was going to mean we were going to be up all night. With our boys, we kind of could take turns. I could wake up once, my wife could wake up once to feed them. With the twins, we were both on duty all the time, and we were trying to figure out how to make sure that our girls were getting the attention that they needed, the twins were getting taken care of, and our toddler boys were not being neglected. One of our boys, he instantly loved the girls. He was all about them. He wanted to help them, wanted to bring them like a burp cloth or help mom and dad bring the stuff over. Our other son wanted nothing to do with them right away. He was like, whatever. And so one of the big challenges we faced early was my wife was trying to breastfeed the girls. And what would happen is she was trying to focus on that procedure of breastfeeding the girls, both tandem feeding them at the same time. Meanwhile, our toddler boys would just be like screaming and running around in circles around my poor wife. And so the babies would get distracted. They'd pull off and wouldn't have a good latch. They wouldn't feed well. And so that was a little crazy. And then we found out that our girls had a problem with their tongues. They were kind of tongue-tied. And so they physically could not get a good latch for breastfeeding. And so that was making it a very frustrating experience for them, for my wife, where they couldn't get enough milk. We ended up switching to pumping breast milk and ultimately formula feeding our girls, which for me, when we moved to bottle feeding our girls, as a dad, I felt I could actually help and contribute a lot more in that regard. Because then when it was time for feeding, my wife could take one of the girls and feed her. I could take the other girl and feed her. And so it was a great opportunity for me as a dad to be really involved in that experience, to spend that one-on-one time with each of my daughters, to feed her and, to study her and talk to her when we're in that moment of feeding. It was a very precious experience for me to be able to participate in that in those early months.
I'm sure it helped with the bonding experience as well. And I suppose then juxtaposition to current day. Can you talk us through some of the years between obviously that newborn stage, you come home from the hospital, to current day? Is there any challenges might have cropped up? One, I'll be honest with you, so I'm in the middle of the toddler mayhem stage at the minute. Island are 2 years old, so it's just absolute chaos at the minute. But one of the things I worry about as a mum of multiples is whenever the girls get older, like say for example, whenever they're at school and say one might be more talented at maths and one might be more talented at English, or one maybe scores higher in a test, or maybe in sports one maybe is ahead of the other. Have you ever encountered that with twins, and have you any tips on how to deal with things like that? Comparison, and trying not to compare each one because they are two separate individuals.
It is really easy to try to compare them, because obviously there's two at the same age, they're doing the same things, they're going through the same experience oftentimes. One thing I've found is I have to remind myself, just like you said, they are unique individuals, and they have, even though our girls, for example, are identical, even though they look almost the same. I mean, obviously to us now they look different, but to everyone else they look identical. But they still have very different personalities, everything from the way that they talk, their speech patterns, their voice, to how they hold their bodies, to the things that they're interested in are different. And so we've liked to focus on what they're interested in, what makes them different, and then, encourage them to pursue those particular interests that they are different from their sister. So a recent example would be our girls they started doing some sports in high school. One of our girls was interested in basketball, and one of our girls was interested in soccer or football, and not the other way around. Like, they didn't both want to do basketball and they didn't both want to do soccer. And so we're like, okay, well, let's do it. Yeah. If you want to do this one sport and you want to do this other sport. And it turned out to be a great experience for each of them, because they had the chance to stand on their own, to be their own person, to establish friendships with their teammates and experience that without their sister. And what would happen is their sister would come to their games. It would, cheer them on, encourage them and stuff like that. And so that was a good interaction to see as well. But they were able to have their own individual experience in that regard. When they were earlier in school, we had a decision of, do we put them in the same class or do they separate them? And we ended up having both sometimes. Like when they started, they were together, and eventually they ended up going into separate classes. We found that one of our girls was a lot more dependent on her sister than the other. One of our girls wanted to be by herself. She wanted to be independent. She didn't want her sister with her all the time. Whereas the other twin was like, I need my sister. My sister helps me. I have to have her with me to make it through this class. So that was a bit of a challenge we had, trying to work through that and encouraging our girl who was very dependent that, yes, here's examples of how you've been able to do things by yourself. You can make it through this. You can overcome this challenge. We, as mom and dad, are here to help you too through that. And so that was a bit of a challenge we had early on with them being together versus separate. But they've had a lot of experiences now since those early days in school. And now they've had the opportunity to be together. They've had the opportunity to be separate. So as we come to the conclusion of their high school, they have one more year of high school before they head off to trade school or college or university. We're hoping that they're getting ready to be independent members of society.
Do they have a twin bond? Are they quite close now at this age?
They are. They're very close. They're great. They're like best friends with each other, which is a beautiful thing to see. Just last night, they went to a concert for an artist that they enjoy together, and they had a great time doing that. So they share a lot of like musical interests, and they have similar friend groups where they'll hang out with similar people. But at the same time, they have relationships with people that like one-on-one, where it's not both sisters engaged in that relationship. But their bond is a beautiful thing. They have a great relationship, a great friendship. They can kind of anticipate each other's actions and what they're going to say because they know each other so well. They've been roommates since they were born, we brought them home from the hospital. And so they are physically very close, which, most of the time is fine. Of course, they argue and they fight sometimes, but that doesn't last very long.
I would love to ask you, we're obviously coming into the summer season very shortly, and lots of us are heading away on their holidays and traveling and things like that. Did you travel much with your family in those younger years?
We did. We love to travel in general, and we realized that when the kids are young, it may seem overwhelming to try to travel with them, and that may prevent you from even taking a trip. But in retrospect, they're actually very portable and easy to travel with. So we did travel with our kids when they were still babies, when they were infants, when they were in their carriers, or we would in their strollers. In the United States at that time, you could fly with infants for free, as if they were under the age of 2. And so we had several trips where we would fly as a family. And each of our girls would just sit on our lap on the plane. My wife would take one of the girls and I would take another girl. And so we did a couple trips like that. I'll be honest, that was not a relaxing travel experience, having to wrangle the toddlers on your lap. But it was possible. And, we did several trips where we would go to, like we went to Disneyland, where we would wear, you baby wear like one of the, we had Bjorn baby carriers where I would wear one of the girls on my chest. My wife would wear one of the girls on her chest. And that was a great experience and a great memory. The girls don't remember that experience, but we do. And we cherish that memory we made together as a family. And we've been traveling ever since. Often it would be just get in the car and drive on a vacation. Sometimes we'd fly places, all dependent on the budget and where we wanted to go. But we enjoy traveling and experiencing new things together as a family. We had a goal as a family to visit. In the United States, we have 50 states. And so we had a goal to visit all 50 states before the kids got to high school. Because we knew when they got to high school, they would start to get jobs, start to have activities and sports, and wouldn't have time to travel as a family. So fortunately, we made that goal. And that was lots and lots of trips over lots of years. We did that. And the kids still talk about those places that they went and the experiences that they had, and we cherish that a lot. I think I mentioned to you before our call, like we actually traveled to Ireland a few weeks ago, and so what a beautiful country you live in. We were only there for a couple of days, but it left a great impression on us and our family.
That was part of a cruise. Tell us about that. Did you travel as a family, or was it just yourself and your wife?
It was the whole family. It was my wife and I and our 4 kids and my dad. Yeah. We were all traveling together. My mom actually passed away last year, and my dad had been taking care of her for many years, and so he had not had a chance to travel at all. So it was a great opportunity to take him to someplace brand new. He'd never been to Europe, and we were like, oh, well, where can we go that would be meaningful to him? We have some family history back in the British Isles, and we decided to take a cruise. So it was all around England, Ireland, Scotland. I even stopped in France for a day. So Ireland was beautiful and a great experience, especially the northern Irish coast was just absolutely gorgeous.
And it's beautiful. If you have the nice sunny weather, we're not as fortunate as you in Austin, Texas. I don't know what the weather was like whenever you were here, but like Northern Ireland is so beautiful in the sunny weather.
Our ship stopped in Belfast, and then we drove north to, like you mentioned, the Giant's Causeway, and There was a White Bay Beach. Actually, the morning that we drove north it was sunny and blue skies. It was a beautiful morning. So we had several stops along. There was like a rope bridge. We visited Dunluce Castle. So it was kind of, yeah, we stopped and made a lot of stops along the coast up there before we headed back to Belfast. And then we had a guide who drove us around the city a little bit and showed us kind of the divided city and the murals and told us a lot about the history of the area. And that was great experience to hear firsthand, someone who had lived through the history there.
No matter how young your family were, you made the effort to travel and see the world. That's one thing that's very important to us in our family. We haven't been brave enough to take any trips as of yet, but it's my one hope definitely for the family. So you've really given me a lot of encouragement there to just go ahead and do it. Like, it just seems to be so much to pack up between like the stroller and clothes and just so much, but I'm sure it's worth it. Like, I'd love to talk to you about is I've spoken to lots of multiple mums and dads when I've been out and about, and one thing that seems to crop up is loneliness. Loneliness seems to be a huge experience among families of multiples. Have you any advice, if there are any listeners out there and they're maybe sitting at home and thinking, gosh, I'm just so overwhelmed with this experience at the minute that I actually feel lonely. Have you any tips or anything for them?
Well, yeah, that's a very real emotion that we're feeling, particularly when you spend almost all of your time taking care of your own children and there's little time for you to work on your relationship with anybody outside the home. I mean, it's a struggle even to maintain your relationship with your partner in those early days when all you're focused on is taking care of the needs of the children. So loneliness is a very, very real concern. We tried to, even early, I guess we focused from the inside out. So we were first taking care of our family and our kids. And then it was like, okay, that became the priority of how can we carve out maybe just a few hours a week for a date night where we go out to eat and we just come back, or we get out of the house for a little bit together so we can spend some time together. And then as the kids got a little more self-sufficient, as they started to sleep more, then we expand that into like, okay, well, how do I have more involvement with friends or neighbors and different social circles like that? We realized that we weren't going to be able to get out much early on in the early months with twins. And so we would try to invite people to the house to help us. Lots of people say, they're excited for you when they find out that you're having twins. And they're like, well, if there's anything I can do to help you, just let me know. Say, well, I have something you can help me do. So come over here this afternoon and help us, clean the kitchen or watch my kids while we take care of something else. So kind of force some social interactions that way where people feel like, friends or family outside of your immediate family feel like they are not just there, but they're helping, they can help provide some kind of service to you. So it's kind of a way to force some socialization that way. I tell a lot of the dads on my podcast or dads I interact with is that stuff that are hobbies or activities you had before the twins, some of those things might have to wait. I have to pause for a season, and then you pick them back up again as your twins get a little bit older. And so there may be a few months where that loneliness is very real. It's just you, your partner, and the family. And then as things get a little more stable, a predictable schedule, you can start to bring those people and activities and things back in to help combat that loneliness.
We had to take a little short break there, and I'm just picking up off the back where we left off. We were chatting about the huge topic of loneliness. The topic of mental health, really addressed and exploring on the podcast. In terms of mental health for twin dads, have you any advice from your own personal experience on tips on minding our mental health during parenthood?
Yes, one thing that I have enjoyed doing is journaling my thoughts. Sometimes when you are alone or you don't have someone to talk to, you can still kind of process those thoughts and emotions just on paper by writing out what you're experiencing, what you're feeling. So I've done that over the years to try to bring out what I'm feeling in regards to that. It's been interesting to also then go back and look at those journals over the years to see how things have progressed, or maybe some things have continued. I know the tendency I have, oftentimes other guys have, is just to not talk to anybody about what they're feeling or thinking, and just holding it all inside, which ultimately is not a very healthy thing to do. One thing I did was found other dads that were not just twin dads, but other dads just in general. We could talk about things that we're going through as dads, as husbands, trying to manage our family relationships, some of the struggles that they're having or that we're having. We could talk through those together to see maybe they have some solutions that we hadn't thought of or some methods that we hadn't considered before. One thing my wife always tells me is that she wants to know what I'm thinking. She wants to know what I'm feeling, and I should have more conversations with her about those things. So I invite dads that are listening to this podcast, make sure you're having those open and honest conversations with your partner too, because you're in a partnership raising your twins and you're there to support each other. So hopefully you can find some, not necessarily solutions, but some comfort in that relationship, right? Where you can bounce ideas and thoughts off each other, or just be there to support each other, let alone going outside of your family unit to find friends that may be in similar circumstances that you can talk to with that regard. I know some dads who've done therapy. It's very easy nowadays to get online therapy sessions where you don't even have to find a local therapist. You can find someone online that will help you just talk through some of the things that you're feeling and challenges that you're facing. So if dads are feeling some emotional or mental strain right now, or some anxiety or some depression about what's going on, don't just hold that in. Talk to somebody. Talk, even if it's just writing down your thoughts on paper, or talking to your partner, or talking to a friend, or talking to a therapist. There's someone who wants to listen and wants to help you through that.
That's great advice, Joe. Thank you so much for sharing that with me. I have to ask you, you're obviously based in Austin, Texas. I have never been, but I would love to go. Can you tell us, especially for a lot of our listeners who haven't been to Austin, what's family life like there? Give us an example of what it's like.
So Austin, we've raised our family here in Austin. My wife and I have had all our kids here. So Austin is a very kind of outdoor friendly environment. There's lots of parks, lots of hike and bike trails, lots of lakes that you can go to for swimming or boating, things of that nature. It does get really, really hot here in the summertime. So lots of time at the pool or trying to escape that way. The spring and the fall are just beautiful seasons here. We enjoyed hiking or going camping as a family. There are lots of things that you can do on the indoors as well, and particularly in the summer when it's really hot, as far as museums, kids museums. Or Austin is the capital of the state of Texas, and so we have a lot of history, government type museums as well that people can visit. And of course, there's a great food culture here of barbecue and Tex-Mex, Mexican food as well.
I'd love to visit someday. But whenever you were talking there about food, a little spark come up in my mind. Grocery shopping is a big thing for me. I haven't been brave enough to take both of the twins out grocery shopping in the trolley. I kind of order my food online most weeks, but I'd love to find the confidence to be able to go to a big grocery store and buy some shopping each week with the twins in the trolley. Have you done that whenever they were like much younger? Different now, but in those younger days, how did you find that experience?
It's a challenge. Yes, it was not easy. Often we would not try to take the whole family grocery shopping. So either I would go to the store and I would take maybe our toddlers and not the baby twins, or my wife would go to the store and I would stay home and watch the kids. There's no shame in that. Especially now where it's a lot easier to order food online or have it delivered to your house, or just stop at the store and they put it in your car for you. But we did venture out with the twins when they were little to the grocery store, and it was like a circus. Often we would try to go, my wife and I would go together with all four children. We would have two shopping carts. You call them trolleys, right? So two trolleys. So we'd put, one kid in the first trolley with my wife, and maybe she would wear one of the other babies, or I would wear one of the babies, and like toddlers would be in the trolleys. So there was always some combination of us wearing a baby or a baby in a car seat in the trolley, and our toddler boys, running around or hanging on the trolley. It was kind of chaos. And between the two shopping carts, there was usually room to actually add the food and the groceries that we needed with the diaper bag and the kids everywhere and everything like that. So we did that. We did that several times. We would try to go just as a whole family to make it relatively easier to manage than just one parent. But also, my wife or I had done it by ourselves too. And that was where, when the girls were really little, like you would wear one of the babies and the other baby would be in the cart, in the trolley. And then our two toddlers would just be following us around. So it was possible. One advantage of that is that everyone around you can see what's going on. They know that you're crazy. You have this whole group of kids, and there's a lot of sympathy of other customers or employees of the store are willing to help you do something. And so that was nice to see that there's nice people out there still that are willing to help you out. So it took a lot of mental preparation to do that. Like, okay, what do I need to do to make sure that our children are safe in the trolley, and make sure that you had all the supplies you needed to go to the store. Make sure you have the list so you're not distracted by, before kids, you can just walk up and down the aisles of the store and look at everything and decide what you want. And it was with little kids in tow, it was a focused, targeted operation. I need to get these 20 things and then I'm out, and there's no room for distraction there.
I notice whenever I am out in public with the twins, we get lots of comments all the time, even though the girls aren't identical. I suppose they're similar height. I do dress them the same at the moment, but whenever they are older, obviously, and they are aware more of their own identity, I'll let them choose their own clothes. And if they want to dress differently, that's fine. That's entirely up to them. But I have to ask, do your twins still get comments now when they're out and about in public, almost 17 years of age? Are you twins? Like, lots of questions. Does that still happen, or is it just whenever they're younger?
No, it still happens. It still happens. It happened a lot more when they were younger, because obviously there's two babies, or you have like a double stroller where they're side by side, and so everyone can see that there's two children the same age. As they've gotten older, they weren't necessarily always side by side, because they could walk behind us or around us or whatever, and so it wasn't as obvious that we had twins. But still, when we're grouped together in a public place, when we're traveling or at the store, people will do a double take and be like, "Wait, are you twins?" The comments aren't as frequently, because now they're just they're teenagers and they style their hair differently, or they wear different clothing. And so at a glance across the way, your first thought isn't, "Oh, those are twins." But when you look at them straight on, you're like, "Oh yeah, you're identical twins." And so that does bring out some comments. Interesting, when we came back from this trip from Ireland and overseas, we had to go through immigration, and they have the face scan where they just look at the camera and identifies who you are. So one of our girls did the face scan and cleared the thing there, and then the second girl comes through the face scan, and like the computer must have barked at the officer, because it's like, "This is the same person you just checked in. What's going on?" And so they had to show the passports and make sure everything are twins.
Have the girls ever shared with you over the years how they feel about being twins?
Yeah, I brought them on my podcast a while ago to ask them kind of those questions, and one thing that really annoys them is that people don't treat them as individuals. People treat them as the twins, So people have a tendency to just call them the twins, or to not learn their individual names. They'll just call them the twins, or they'll just call out both names at the same time. And so that's really been frustrating for the girls, like, particularly at school, where, walking down the hall, people can't just call them by name and have a personal relationship with them, because they're just the twins. So that's been kind of frustrating for them in that regard. But that said, their true friends, learn who they are and know who they are individually, and know their different personalities, just like we as parents know that. And so I guess that's one way that they've been able to filter out their true friends versus not just acquaintances, right? They do enjoy, they can share all their clothes, they can trade clothes and their accessories and everything back and forth. So that's been fun for them to watch, for them to do as well. But overall, I think it's been, I know parents say like, "Oh, well, twins have a built-in friend all the time." And in our case, that's been true. They love spending time together and doing things together, and are great friends in that regard. So overall, it's been good. They've enjoyed being twins. Now, granted, they don't know any differently. So that's all they've ever known, is being a twin and having their sister there with them all the time. And so I think as in the next couple of years, when they, become adults and they leave the house and they start their lives independently, it'll be interesting to see how that relationship evolves over time. That'll be fun to watch.
I know my girls are only 2, but the thought of them leaving and growing up, I will at some stage just have to let them fly and have their little life at the minute, but at least that's many years hopefully down the line. We are coming to the end of the podcast episode for this week. We start off the podcast chatting about your podcast and books. Can you remind our listeners, if anybody would be interested, checking out your podcast or checking out some of your books as well?
Yeah, I'd love to connect with anyone who's listening to the podcast. You can find my website is dadsguidetotwins.com, where you'll find my podcast. You'll find tons of articles to help dads along the twin journey. I have 2 books that I've written for dads of twins. The first is called Dad's Guide to Twins, and that's really to help you through the twin pregnancy, help you get ready for the twins' arrival. And then I have a second book called Dad's Guide to Raising Twins, and that's going to be, cover the first several years with twins, how to help you through those challenges in those early years, early months. We've talked a little bit about that today on the podcast. So those books are available directly on my website, dadsguidetotwins.com, or on Amazon. You can get those books there. I'd love to connect with you all on Instagram. My handle is Twin Dad Joe. You could reach out to me there as well. And I would love to connect. If anybody has any questions or wants to just send me a message, I'd love to hear from you.
Tell us, in your experience, what makes being a twin dad so special?
I love being a twin dad in that it puts you in this elite fraternity of men around the world who are going through the same experience as you. Having been a dad before, my twins were born. I already loved being a dad. I loved fatherhood and the unique challenges that gave me. Having twins, it's extremely rewarding to me to be able to have these two beautiful girls, and even though they are identical on the outside, just really learning their individual uniqueness and celebrating that. And that's something that a lot of people on the outside looking in just assume twins are always the same, and realizing that that's not the case. I mean, even I thought that before we had twins. So twins are identical, they're going to be the same. But realizing that they're each uniquely beautiful in their own way, and discovering that through all these years of being their dad. Being a father of twins is not easy, particularly in those early years. Well, even now. I mean, I just spent a year trying to teach my daughters how to drive a car. So that's maybe a story for another day. But it does require extra patience. It requires making sure that you're focused on the individual relationship with each child, which is an extra challenge with twins because they're the same age. And you know, the default is to group them together like everyone else does, but you have to be very conscious of that to maintain the individual one-on-one relationship with each. So I wouldn't give it up for anything. Twins were a complete surprise to us. We didn't know that was going to happen, but I cannot imagine life any other way. And they're just a beautiful part of our family right now. And I'm glad to be a twin dad.
Beautiful, Joe. Listen, thank you so much. I have to say, I really enjoyed chatting with you today. I learned so much, and it's really, really interesting to hear from your perspective, and you know, you're many years down the road for me, in fact 15 years ahead. So I have learned so much, and I really do appreciate you making time for us on the podcast. I'm just looking at my watch here now. It's coming up to 4 p.m. here in Northern Ireland. My twins are next door in their little toy room, and their dad has been playing the past hour or so and taking care of them for me, so it gave us an opportunity to have a chat. So I'm so thankful for that. You probably have heard them throughout the podcast, and I can hear them at the minute. They're getting a little bit restless, so I'm just looking out the window at the minute. The sun is still shining here in Northern Ireland. I don't know what it's like in Austin. Hopefully it's nice there, but I'd probably pack the two twins up now and go to the park just for everybody to get a little run out of the house and enjoy the swings and the slide. But listen, thank you so much for your time. I really do appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure. Tell your husband thank you as well.
Well, indeed. Well, that's it for this week's episode. Thank you for your time today. I will join you next time for a chat on the Twins Mummy NI podcast. In the meantime, take care, and remember, there is always hope.